Hi, I'm Pete and welcome to Just a Few Acres Farm. I'm going to dedicate this video to talking about the schedule for the Farmall 856 restoration, finishing that up, the international truck, and the construction of the new shop. And I'm going to do a lot of talking, so for those who may not like a lot of talking, consider yourself forewarned. First, the Farmall 856. It sits up here in the upper barn without sheet metal, without fenders, without the three-point hitch, and without the seat rebuilt. I got further on the 856 this spring than I thought I would, partially owing to how rainy it was. There was nothing else to do. I have here a new reproduction set of fenders for it. There's new seat cushions in that big box. I have new emblems for it. The parts from the hitch, the sheet metal are all in here in the shop, but I just don't have the time this time of year. It's tedious. I'll have at least 50 hours just in prepping and probably painting the sheet metal, which I'll do in here, and then I'll bring it all up to the upper barn and finish putting the tractor there. And that's not even including the seat. The seat is really tedious to go through the suspension for. So that'll be coming when the weather turns cool, early or mid-fall probably. As for the international truck, well, here it sits. I plan on pulling it out into the field beyond here as soon as I get some stuff moved around out there. It's kind of in the way here. I won't be working on this again until after I finish the tractor. I'm close enough to finishing the tractor where I just don't want to get into another project in the middle before finishing that. So that means that this is going to be late fall, winter. You know, the engine's done. It's in the shop. It's ready to put in. I think I'm going to pull the cab off this and start with a frame up. Part of the problem with this truck for me is I don't have a motivating vision of what I want it to be when the work is done. Mainly, I can't decide on what goes on the rear. I want something with some mass to it to sort of balance with this big cab, and I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, and when I do, it'll probably help me move along faster on what it should be. On to the new shop. This is the old shop right here. Ignore the junk. I'm going to be moving that into the old barn pretty quick. Here's the inside of the old shop. Built originally as a wood shop. It is 18 feet this way, 24 feet this way, and 8'7" clear to the ceiling. The overhead door to the shop is 7 foot tall and 9 foot wide. This is really the meat of the video. The tractor and the truck are simple scheduling things. The shop is a much more complicated discussion, and it's not the first time we've talked about it, you and I, on this channel. If you remember back a few years ago, I was going to build a new pig breeding barn. It was going to be this Cadillac facility, and we were going to raise more sought after breeds of pigs and go into that business. And I chewed on it for about a year, and it morphed several times, the project. First, I was going to build a new fabric arch structure, and then it turned into renovating the old pole barn. And then I thought about it some more and saw how the pig business was going. And ultimately, all that discussion after about a year became putting an addition on the cattle barn, what I call the upper barn, which worked out really well. You know, it took all that thought to come to that conclusion, and the time was really necessary to turn it over and think about it. And now I have an upper barn where, you know, we have the winter pen for the cattle. We've got hay storage right there. In the wintertime, we don't ever have to take any of the equipment outside to care for the cattle. We feed them right there off the hay pile. It works really good with the winter pasture. And then we reorganized everything. If you remember in old videos, that upper barn was just full of stuff. It had all kinds of tractors and implements and just garbage. And anyway, we cleaned all that out. We made the old pole barn into an equipment storage barn and kind of reorganized our operation, all starting with what I thought would be something completely different at the beginning. Just like with the pig barn, the more I thought about a new shop, the more I questioned my decision. Something smelled fishy, and it took me a while to put my finger on it. In my old job as an architect, the most important part to the budget of any project was always the programming phase. And the programming phase was when the client would come to you and say, I think I need this. I need 20,000 more square foot for this thing. And if you did programming right, you really would get into how whatever the owner's doing operates and understand that operation and try and give them what fits them best. And quite often it was completely different from what they thought they originally needed. And it's not that they didn't know what they needed right off the bat, it's that there's a structured process to figuring out what your needs are. And without knowing that process, it's very hard to arrive at the correct result. And I guess I hurt myself a few times as an architect because my fee was based on the size of the project. And if you said, well, you know, you really don't need that much space if you reconfigure these other things, you'll be all right. Anyway, I guess it's part of being responsible and doing a good job. The first thing to look at, really, to understand the need is to understand how I use this space. And it's not typical. I don't pull equipment into the shop unless I'm doing an extended restoration, the kind of deal with the 856 where it goes in and then 18 months later it comes out. I don't do maintenance in here. I actually prefer to do maintenance like oil changes and routine stuff either in the driveway right next to the shop, under a tree, or if I have to do it in inclement weather, I do it in the big upper barn. So it's not like a typical shop where you're pulling stuff in and out. What I do use the shop for is extended restorations, and when I have small component rebuilds to do on a shop bench, say a carburetor, magneto distributor, PTO pump, all those kinds of things, they go into the shop. So that's the existing shop. Across the driveway here, this is where I'd planned on putting a new shop. Once again, pardon the mess, this is mid-cleanup. I still have to grade this area off, but this is where the new shop fits pretty well. And for a new shop, I was talking about a 40-foot wide by 60-foot long by 16-foot tall shop. This has good access to the driveways to get stuff in and out. Electricity is a bit of a pain because it has to go out to the road. I would need a new service put in because our current service is maxed out, and I'd have to dig up the driveway, but it can all be done. As for cost, I never got a price, but I'll bet you it's at least 100 grand. If you think about things like, you know, the outside shell as well as concrete slab, fill, insulation, interior finishes, heating, cooling, lighting, all those systems, electrical inside, it adds up. I don't know how best to put this, but when I think of money, I think of real money. When I buy a vehicle, I think of the total cost, not the monthly payment. With a building, I think of the upfront. I'm shelling it out of my money, the money that's coming to me or has come to me. And I think, what else could I do with that money? Is that really worth it? And how much freedom do I lose in life if I spend that money? How much longer do I have to work until I can retire? How much am I affecting my overall quality of life by shelling out this huge amount of money for one thing, and is it really worth that? And that's one of the reasons I think about these things for so long. Now, when I pulled the 856 in here, the very first video in the series, I said, this is going to be the ultimate test of whether I need a new shop or not, because this is the biggest thing, the 856, that I'm gonna pull in here. I'm never gonna restore anything, any tractor bigger than that. And you know what? It went fine. I didn't have any major inconveniences. I did a double split on the tractor. I pulled the thing, you know, in the videos, I had it in all kinds of pieces in here. I had enough space, mainly on this tool storage or bench thing that I have here, to put everything that was important to keep inside. And the big stuff I put right outside the door over here. Heavy stuff, I have that 2-ton hoist, which is not in here right now. The hoist is an amazingly versatile tool to have in a shop. Anything heavy I had to lift, I just maneuvered the hoist around and lifted it. It was no big deal. And getting it in and out of here was a 10-minute job both ways. You know, I pushed it in with the 656 and the bucket loader. I think I had to take the air out of the tires to get it because the steering wheel was still on it. And when I pulled it out, I pulled the steering wheel off of it, I pulled the throttle lever off of it, and Hillary and I pushed it out with the tires blown up. It was very easy. So, you know, the way that you use something is really going to affect what you need. And like I said, this is not a maintenance shop. I actually prefer to do maintenance outside. I prefer to do it in the fresh air, outside, in the sunshine. I have a lot of windows in here because I like a lot of light. I like to feel like I'm outside. I like to have views. And that's why, given the choice, I do that work outside. If you know me well enough, you're not surprised. You know I change my mind on these big things on a routine basis. But one way to confirm whether your suspicions are right is to make a list of disadvantages and advantages to either option. So let's go through those. Let's start with the current shop, and first the deficiencies with the current shop. The deficiency I feel the most in the shop is I've run out of tool storage space. I've got toolboxes over there. I've got stuff on the wall. I have more tools than I have storage for, and it's begun to overflow into the garage next door. That's the most pressing need. I'm out of wall space to store things. Disadvantage number two, I can only work on one project at a time, one big project at a time here. So I pull a tractor in for restoration. I have to finish that tractor before I pull it out and get the next thing in. In reality, I'm one person and this is a hobby. So is it a disadvantage? I don't know. Number three, the size of the overhead door, and especially a lot's been made of the 7-foot height of the overhead door. Yes, I have been over sometimes when I pulled things in, and sometimes I've pulled right up to the door sitting in a tractor seat. I try not to do that. And as I said, I don't pull things in and out of here. What you've seen in those videos is probably every single time I've ever pulled anything out in and out of here in the last 5 years, and I could probably count them on one and maybe a half hands that things have gone through that door in those 6 years. On to current shop advantages. Number one, and the biggest one, it's built and paid for. You can't underestimate that first advantage. That's worth a whole lot. And the second advantage is it's really close to the house. There's our back door right there. I just have to walk about 50 feet down that walk and I'm inside in the winter. That's really nice. Advantage number three, and I think this is a big one too, it's really easy and cheap to heat, cool, and light this shop because of its small volume, and I was able to insulate it pretty well. A little 25,000 BTU propane forced air. It's got a chimney on it. Heats this place up in no time. If I want to put a little window air conditioner in here, it would cool it down in no time. It cost me practically nothing in a winter to heat this. I kept the heat on most of last winter, and I probably used someplace between 200 and 300 gallons of propane for the entire winter. And I guess the final advantage is that its size forces me to think, to be creative about how I use the space and to really plan my projects ahead. And to not buy lots of tools. You need of this and you need of that. This one tool that you use for a minute out of 5 years because you got this one specific task, when I can, pull a socket out and jerry rig it to do the same thing. I'm not about tools at all. I'm about keeping things simple. The shop forces me to do so. On to the new shop. What are its advantages? It's new. Everybody likes new stuff. It looks good on YouTube, right? There's a kind of, a kind of proxy or living vicariously, to see the new and fancy stuff on YouTube. Equipment too. I run this old junk, and sometimes I think, oh geez, people want to see the new stuff, but I don't know, it's got character. So it would look good. And I would have lots of space, no question about it, and I'd have lots of height. I wouldn't have to really think about how I'm doing stuff. I'd just pull it in there and go to town. I would, be proud of it, that's for sure. But the biggest thing, I think the biggest advantage to having a new shop is the ability to do any work in any weather. Right now I have to plan things. I say, well, I'm going to do this big job when the weather's kind of warm or warm. up in the upper barn because I've got high bay. If I got to pull a wheel off the 656 like I did a while back, or put a canopy on the 856, you know, you don't want to do that when it's 10 below outside. I could do that with a new shop with high bay space, and I could do that whenever I wanted to. That's great having that kind of flexibility. Now on to new shop disadvantages, and the first and most glaring is the cost. Like I said, money is in part what gives us freedom, and spending money limits our freedom in some ways. So that's the biggest thing to get over. The second thing is that first cost will probably wind up bigger than I think it will be because of what's called scope creep. And I've seen a fair amount of it already in discussions I've had with folks about a new shop. As long as you're building a new shop, you might as well put this in, or put that in, or buy this tool, or buy... It gets bigger and bigger the more you go. It's just like restoring a tractor. You say, well, while I'm in here, while I've got this transmission torn apart, I might as well do this. I did that with the torque amplifier in the 856, and all of a sudden the project is 10 times, it wouldn't be 10 times with a shop, but a lot more than what you thought it would be. So that's something to be aware of. It's kind of difficult for me to get electricity to a new building. As I said, our service is maxed out. I got to deal with a utility company. Last I checked, it was like a 6-month wait, and it's terribly intrusive the way electricity would go in, and just a giant headache. I know after managing so many projects in my former career that, oh my gosh, there's some things you run into with utilities that just make everything grind to a halt. The fourth thing is that I feel that building this big box is wasteful. I think that if I needed this big box and I could justify the need for it, it would be worthwhile. But I don't have a repair business. I'm just a hobbyist who makes do with what he has. It's wasteful to spend all this money and resources on something I probably wouldn't use to its maximum efficiency. You know, I'd have stuff tucked over here and stuff tucked over there, and this thing's sitting there that really don't need a fancy new building to be housed. And for the final disadvantage, let's look around here at the building stock that I have right now. I got this old shed here, the house over here. I've got this 3-bay garage with an upper story here, the old pole barns around the corner here, and the big upper barn is there. Every single one of those buildings comes with a set of responsibilities that I have as building owner. I got to maintain them. I got to pay for their utilities. I have to pay property taxes on them for the rest of my life. So you can't just think about first cost. You've got to think of all the commitment you're making to ongoing costs, be they labor in maintaining systems or actual dollars in paying taxes or paying for replacement of components. That certainly adds up, and I have enough trouble taking care of just what I have here. Getting better at it, but I have a lot of deferred maintenance to take care of. Speaking of maintenance and owner responsibility, look at how long I've deferred maintenance on this old outhouse. How am I going to take care of a 45 by 60 shop when I can't even take care of a 5 by 8 outhouse properly? This trumpet vine my great-grandmother planted, and it's come back. It's very pretty on the whole. I like things that show their age. This is an extreme example. It's telling that when I was planning my shop and I was doing drawings on paper, just simple floor plans, that every single one that I drew, I quartered that 40 by 60 space and assigned different uses to each of the 4 quarters. And in one of the quarters, I had planned on walling that off, so that would be a 20 by 30 foot quarter, putting a mezzanine over the top of it to drop the ceiling height down to about 8 feet, and then put what I would alternatively call a tool room or a fine mechanical shop, fine being fine things like carburetors and fine work, in that quarter, because I thought, well, that quarter will be easy to light and heat with the lower ceiling, and it's homier than working in this big giant echoey space. In essence, what I was doing is taking the shop that I had and building a big shell around it. It's like, I could just build that big building right where my shop is. The reality is I already have that. I have that nice, cozy, easy to heat, cool, and light space, And I have several big barns very close to it where I can bring stuff and have it sit to do high base work when needed. I kept drawing what I already have. That was the most telling thing of all. Before I go back inside, one more thing. What about parking our vehicles in the garage and building more space to take care of that? Hillary and I don't care to. We just talked about it yesterday. We have to clean our vehicles off 10 or 15 times, probably, some snow on them in the winter parked outside. We don't have the terrible heat or, really pounding sun that fades paint. We don't get hailstorms here. We don't get dust storms here. The worst thing that we have here is road salt, and it is my belief that it's actually better to leave a vehicle outside during the winter, during road salt season, because the road salt and slush snow doesn't melt off of it when it's outside. It tends to stay frozen. When you pull your car into the garage, it warms it up just enough so all that stuff melts, and of course when it melts it becomes more corrosive. So I don't know, it's a discussion you can have back and forth. The fact is that in our case, we really don't care to have our cars in a garage. So I've decided not to build a new shop, instead to make do with what I have, and I may change my mind again. It's fine to do so. I mean, if you come up with a different sort of value system, there's no worries in changing your mind. What I am going to do, and what Hillary and I are in the midst of, is rearranging this. This is the inside of that two-car garage section, and we're using it now. It used to have even more freezers, and we're selling off about half these freezers. We'll have 4 big ones when we're done. We've got some feed in here. We don't have problems with mice or rats in here, so our feed gets stored in here, and I have my woodworking equipment here. The plan is to take all what's left of the freezers, put them over on this side, and kind of make this the farm storage side. Put a wall through here as a dust barrier, and so that I can heat that side. That wall adjoins my shop, so I'll have this space, which is 12 foot wide by 24 foot that way, and all my woodworking equipment's on wheels, so I have a whole wall here for more tool storage, cabinet shelves, toolboxes. I have the ability to do woodworking projects in this space, since all the table saw and the bandsaw and the dust removal system and everything's on wheels. It can go around reconfigured. And then if I run into a big woodworking job, I don't know if I'll be in the tractor restoration business forever. Everything gets old after a while. I can just take that woodworking equipment and stick it in the bucket loader through one of these overhead doors, and I've done this many times before. I just lift it up a little bit with a bucket loader, shuttle it over to the other side of the wall, and away I go. I have a bigger woodworking shop. So that's kind of our plan. It's going to take us a while to get everything reorganized, but by this winter I hope to have it in the stage where we can start building it out. A few closing thoughts. I could have made this a very short video and said, I'm not building a new shop, but I wanted to take you through the way I go, the process. There's a process to figuring out whether you need something or not. And in the course of the time I've been on YouTube, I've talked to people that bought whole farms without going through any sort of a structured process to figure out if that's what they really wanted, if that's what would truly give them satisfaction, and the intricacies of the business model too. I mean, you got to go through that process. Now, there's another side to this that I haven't covered. I could just build a shop aside from all of these practical concerns because I want one and it would make me happy. In my case, the bang isn't worth the buck. But in somebody else's case, it might be. They might have exactly the same situation as me and say, it's worth it to me in my retirement years to have this wonderful shop to putter around in. Just the fact of the matter for me is I'm interested in so many different things that putting all my money on one square or one hobby, well, it's really not worth it to me. But it may be to you. Anyway, if you've stuck around this long, I greatly appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.